Hello, my name is Jason Weiser, and this is an introduction to the basics of creating models in Maya. This is the Maya interface, and let's start with this big central screen called the viewport. Right now we can see just one viewport, perspective labeled PERSP. If we hold down the Alt or Option key and then click on the right mouse, we get a zoom feature with the right mouse. If we click on the middle mouse, holding down the Alt or Option key, we get a pan. And if we click on the left mouse, we get an orbit. That's holding down the Alt and Option and using the three mice buttons, the middle mouse treated as a button and not a scroll wheel. To bring an object into the scene, we go up here to the shelves. The Poly Modeling shelf offers 8 initial options, including a basic cube. When a cube is created, we can look here on the right in the channel box and see the basic transform information. If we hit W, then here on the left, we go from a select tool to a move and select tool, and then we get this gizmo, axes that represent the Cartesian coordinate system. Clicking and dragging on the red x-axis lets us move side to side. Clicking and dragging on the green y-axis lets us move up and down. The blue z-axis lets us move forward and back, and if we click on these squares in between, then we can move on 2 axes at a time, essentially moving on the plane that they define. If we click on the central blue square, we move on all 3 axes, and that's actually a lot harder to control where it's going in space. It's moving relative to the screen, and I recommend that only if we are in the orthographic views. The orthographic views are available if we tap the spacebar. Now we have the perspective view, the top view, the front view, and the side view. So if we drag the object up on the y-axis, we can see in the front and side view the object moving up. In the top view, we don't see a change because it's moving toward the camera. Here we see the result of moving in the front view. In the front axis, the front view does not move, and here moving in the side axis, the side view does not move. We can switch from the Move tool, which was the W key, or clicking on this button here on the left, to the E key, which gives us rotation. Clicking on one of these axes allows us to rotate the object itself, not the view, which was rotated by holding down Alt and clicking and dragging on the left mouse. Notice that these circles are the same colors as the move axes. Green is up and down. When we're in rotation, the green axis is the equator on this globe, also called the gimbal ball, and so we can rotate around its central axis. Notice that the Move tool is preserving its up and down. It is currently set to be in world coordinates, while the Rotation tool is following the angle of the object. You can change those by double-clicking on the tool itself here on the left. And we can decide, is the axis orientation the object or the world? For rotation, we almost always want object. And for the Move tool, it can also be helpful to work in object. So the axes are in the direction that the object has been rotated. If we go to the Scale tool, which is the R key, clicking and dragging on the central cube gives us a uniform scale. It gets bigger or smaller in all directions. Whereas clicking and dragging on just one of the axes will squash or stretch the object, giving us a non-uniform scale. Right now this axis is set to object, so it preserves the direction of the model. But if we change this to world, then we're scaling it and skewing it according to the world coordinates. Hitting Command Z will undo all of these steps, repeated Command Z. To redo, we hit Shift Z. Command Z or Control Z to undo, Shift Z to redo. Here on the right, we can see the results of those transforms, and we can see that our scale is 111, whereas we make it bigger, we can see that change. Our translate is currently off-center. If we select all 3 of these inputs and hit the number 0 and hit return, now the object is once again centered. If I hit W and drag it away, we change these values, select them, hit 0, and then hit return, and they all go back to center. Rotate, similarly, can be changed, and then select all of these, hit 0, and it's once again an upright object. To make a duplicate of an object, we can hit Command D, and that makes a copy. To stack one object on another, it is best to work in these orthographic views. Here in the front view to make sure one's on top, and here in the top view to make sure they're actually lined up with each other. To select more than one object, we can either click and drag to select around the objects, or click on one object, hold down the Shift key, and click on another. If we have one selected, and we hold down Shift and then select around, it will invert the selection. The object that was selected becomes unselected. If we want to be able to select around and have everything just be selected, hold down Control Shift. That's true both on a Mac or a PC. The original object has inputs. This is a node added to the model. We can change the width of the object without changing its scale. We can change the height of the object without changing its scale. We can add subdivisions. The duplicate does not have an input graph by default. If we want a duplicate to have an input graph, we would need to duplicate in a different way. Edit, Duplicate Special, and go to the option box. Here in the option box, we'd say Duplicate Input Graph. Hit Duplicate Special, and now this duplicate also has the ability to have different numbers of divisions. Those divisions allow us to manipulate the object on a component level. Right-click on an object and you can choose its vertex, edge, or face components. If I choose vertex, then I can select on one or more vertices and I can transform them, move, rotate, or scale the distance between them. A single vertex cannot be rotated or scaled because there is no mass. Right-click hold for edge mode, and I can select one or more edges. Hitting Q allows me to select without seeing one of the transform gizmos, and then I can hit W to move out that entire row. If I double-click an edge, it selects the entire loop, and I can now hit R and scale that entire loop. If I click on one edge, I'm going to go back to Q so that I only have selection, and then shift-click on its neighbor by double-clicking. That selects a ring. The ring selected, I can hit R and scale up a larger area of the model. With face selected, I can move, rotate, or scale just this face. And this may begin to feel like we're working with a block of clay. And you may be wondering, well, how do we really pull out new areas of the clay? For that, we have to switch from the channel box, which is what we've been seeing, see the transforms and the inputs, over here to the modeling toolkit. And the modeling toolkit gives us buttons for going to vertex, edge, and face mode. It also gives us a quick, easy way to get to object mode in order to click on other objects or make object level changes. Here in the face mode, we have tools that are exceptionally useful for modeling. Up here at the top menu, half of these menu items are for modeling. We have mesh and edit mesh and mesh tools, but these only display if our module here in the upper left corner is set to the modeling module. If it is set, for example, to the rigging module, all of those modeling menus go away. But the modeling toolkit still has these tools available. Switching back to the modeling module, let's go through some of these modeling toolkit functions. The first one is extrude. Click extrude, and it may not look like anything's happened, but in fact, whole new geometry has been created, and we can see the gizmo has been changed to follow the direction of the face. We call that direction the normal, which is a mathematical term referring to the vector that is perpendicular to the faces that are selected. If I click and drag on this axis, I can pull out that geometry. Hitting extrude automatically created all this geometry from the original face to the surface from which it was extruded. I can pull it out directly, or I can use thickness to define how much it gets pulled out, and offset gives us a scale option. I can click on this circle tool and get rotation. I can add divisions along its length, but where this really gets powerful is when we hit one of the transforms like W in order to finish that extrude and then extrude again, pulling out another one, scaling, or using offset, and in this way we can create really complex geometry. If I want to extrude out a shape that is more rounded, I can use multi-cut. Multi-cut is available in any of these components. I prefer to do it in the face mode. And this allows me to click on vertices, edges, or faces to cut a specific form that I want to make. Hit return both to finish that cut and to make a new cut available. Hit return and I can keep making cuts. What I'm doing now is I'm adding essentially scaffolding lines from the original form I created to the vertices on the surrounding geometry. This is in order to have four-sided shapes. Modeling works better if all of the faces are four-sided. This one here is five-sided, but that's inside the form I plan to extrude. That's okay for now. The outside forms are now all three or four-sided. To get rid of these edges in the middle, to make an easier extrude, I can select them and then hit the backspace or delete key on your keyboard. And that returns these edges to a state of flux, meaning I can select now this entire face with one click. And of course it could be moved, rotated, or scaled, but what I want to do is extrude it. And that allows me to pull out the geometry from the shape that I created. And now I'll extrude again. Rotate this down, extrude again. Hit E for rotate to rotate this down, and extrude again. One last extrude. This curved handle-like shape can now be useful for demonstrating another function. I'm going to select these two faces here by selecting one and holding down Shift while I select the other. I'm orbiting by holding down Alt or Option, and then I can Shift-click to add these two faces. So I have four faces selected. Of course, it could be any number on the two sides. It's good for what I'm about to show you if they be the same number on each side. And now I can hit Bridge. And Bridge creates geometry between the two of these. Hit W, any of the transforms would work, to end the bridge function. And now I have geometry built between them. If I hit the number 4 on the keyboard, I get wireframe mode and I can see how this geometry appears. We can see how it is a hollow form that the extrusions are helping to create. If I select the edges of this bridged part and hit 5 so we can see surfaces again, 4 for wireframe, 5 for shading. I've got these edges selected and I selected them by orbiting to a side where I can see them clearly and then clicking and dragging to select through them. I can now click on the Connect tool. Connect allows me to draw a line perpendicular to selected edges. This is one connect, but I can go down here and I can make the segments be 3 and get 3 edges. Instead of having them centered, I can decide to slide down or up. 0.5 puts them in the middle. If I hit R as one of the transforms to end this function, I can then scale this, creating a more interesting curve. Double-click the center line, I can make it bigger or smaller to create a curved form. When we are modeling, eventually we want to make sure there are no vertices that are just lying on a straight line. Right now this vertex here is just lying on a straight line. We'd like that to actually be more curved so that it does some work. It's contributing to the form. So I can move the vertices around it and we get a more curved area there and up here and down here. So that is Bridge and Connect. One more tool that I'd like to show among this list is Bevel. Bevel is good for taking one edge and curving it. Clicking on Bevel, that one edge becomes 2. But if I set my segments from 1 to 2, then we get 3. If segments is set, let's say, to 10, then we get this very curved edge. And the fraction can be increased to spread that out further and further, creating a smoother curve, or smaller to create a tighter curve. With a curve this tight, we probably don't want 10 divisions there. Let's set this back down to maybe 3 or 5, enough to make it feel like it's curved without wasting a ton of geometry in that area. So those are a lot of the basic functions for modeling. Let's now create something. The first thing I'd like to demonstrate is a basic cabinet. I'll create a box. I'm going to hit W to lift it up. The Z-axis shows me the front. And now going to the channel box and the inputs, I'm going to increase the width. I select the word for width and then middle mouse drag here in the viewport to increase that width. This is a nice quick way to make your changes. I don't have to type in a number unless I want something super precise. I can hit height and then middle mouse click and drag in the view. Right now, these are set to centimeters, and it's a good idea to work with a consistent unit. So I'm going to click here on this little running person, which gives me all sorts of preferences for the program. I can ignore all of these for now except for settings, and I can change my settings from centimeter to meter. Hitting save, I can now make a form about 3 feet wide and about 9 feet tall. Would be about 3 meters. And I only need it to be about 1.5 feet wide. This is a pretty big chest of cabinets. Let's actually make this only 2 meters tall, which is about the height of a person. If I hit the F key while hovering over the front view, it shows me the full extents over the side view and over the top view. I can then hold down Alt and pull back. F centers the view on whatever is selected. So now I need to cut in the rectangles that are then going to be extruded inward. One way to do that would be to use the Connect tool to draw lines between these forms. I'll start by selecting the top and the bottom, going to the Modeling Toolkit, hitting Connect. I'll set this to just 2 segments. I can then click on Pinch and middle mouse drag here in the view to either make these closer together or further apart. And I want them further apart to be the edges of the drawers that I'm making. Hit W to finish it, and then I'll select the edges on the side as well. I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 drawers. It's going to be a bigger cabinet in the bottom and 2 on the top. So I'll go to Connect. I'll set this to 6. I'll set my pinch back to 0. So 1 drawer will be in here, and 1 will be in here, and 1 will be in here. Hitting W, I can double click this line and drag it up, and this one to drag it up as well. That's the space for the first drawer. I'll make a thin shelf between them, and here's the space for the second drawer, and then I'm going to have these big doors here in the bottom. Double-clicking on edges to select them using the Move tool by hitting W or clicking on this button to move them up or down on the axis. Try not to hit this blue square. Use the axes for maximum control. Now I will select this face, and this face by holding down Shift, and this face by holding down Shift. I can hit 4 so I can be seeing inside my geometry. I can hit Extrude, and then I can push inward. Hitting 5, I can see how that geometry has been created. And hitting 4, I can see that I'm not passing through the other side of my model, which I certainly don't want to do. It is true I have left this side to be a more than 4-sided shape, and for quick purposes you can leave it like that. But for better rendering, it's good to have 4-sided shapes. I can select this vertex, shift select this vertex, and hit Connect. Connect on edges draws new lines perpendicular to the selected edges, but Connect on vertices will simply draw a line between the selected vertices. Now I'll select this vertex, shift select this vertex, and hit Connect. Even though the form that was created is a triangle, it's still 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. Now I can select this one and this one to connect. That makes a triangle. It's actually 3 edges. And this one for a triangle. And now everything on this side is 3 or 4 edges, which creates predictable rendering in Maya. And I will leave the other side as an exercise. Right-click, Object Mode. And in order to create doors here for this bottom area, I'm going to create a brand new box. I'm going to lift it up, and going to the channel box, going to the inputs, I'm going to click on the width, type in the values. Right now this is a width of 1 meter. We want something more like 0.45. Sometimes when we are in meters, clicking and dragging version can be a bit harder to manage. So we can just type in the values. Make this 0.9. And for the depth, 0.1. Hitting W and dragging over. Let's try 0.05. A nice thin door. It's a little bit too wide to have two of them, so let's go to the width and try just 0.42. If I hit Command D, that's closer. I'll try 0.41. Now if I rotate this, it's not rotating like a door, it's rotating from the center. In order to move the hinge to the side where we want it, we hit the letter D, and that gives us a gizmo moving tool. And we can click on the x-axis to move the gizmo, and then hit D again to go back to an ordinary move tool. And now if I hit E, it'll rotate from the hinge. If I want a handle on this door, I can select this face, go to the modeling toolkit, do an extrude, and not pull out the geometry. Instead of pulling out the geometry, I can just click an offset or hit R to scale. And then I can move this over. This is going to be a handle that curves. If I hit F, that selection becomes the center of my orbit, which is easier on the wrist. Clicking and dragging on the x-axis, I'm now going to select these two edges, hit connect, and set this back to have only two segments. I can scale non-uniformly to push them away from each other here on the y-axis, and then I can go to the face tool to select these two faces, extrude this geometry forward once, extrude again for a second, and then select this face and select this face and bridge to make a handle for that door. To make the handle feel a little bit less boxy, I can select this edge and non-uniform scale them a bit closer to each other. I can also select these outer edges and non-uniform scale them closer together. Be careful of a thing in Maya that's only been around for a few versions. If you hold down Shift and move the mouse over an already selected part of the geometry, you'll notice that little word extrude. This is a way to extrude geometry accidentally. It can be useful for someone who's very experienced with the tool, but I would recommend that for those who are beginning to just use the extrude button and to be very careful to not click and drag while holding Shift on already selected geometry. Only hold down Shift to click on something new. As you can see there's a little plus symbol as opposed to the extrude word. So now that I have this door, I want to make a mirror. We can go back to Edit, Duplicate Special, Option Box, turn off Duplicate Input Graph, and instead look at Scale. Even though it's not labeled, this first box is the x-axis, the red one. This here is the y-axis, the green one, and this here is the z-axis. We want to mirror side to side, that's the red x-axis. So here on Scale, we do a -1, and this will make a copy that is a -1 scale on the x-axis. Hit Duplicate Special, and now we have a copy that will rotate in the opposite direction. Lastly, I'm going to make one drawer. Here's a box. Going to the channel box, clicking on the inputs, I can scale the width and the height and the depth. Hitting W, put it in position, give it a little bit more height. If it's hard to do it precisely there, then we can always type in the number, like 0.35. And now, I want to make it a drawer. I'll select the face on the top. I can do that in the modeling toolkit by selecting face. And then I can hit extrude and hit R to scale inward to make a lip. And then extrude again to push this downward. Hitting 4, I can make sure I'm not going below the other geometry. And now I'll select this face in front, hit extrude, and scale inward. For the drawer, instead of these full handles, I'd like just to have a knob. And this is a good opportunity to demonstrate how to create a rounded shape out of a square one. I'll hit F to make this selection the center of my orbit. And I'll scale to try to get a pretty close to perfect square with even sides. And I think I'll drag this up a little bit so that the knob is coming from above instead of from the middle. What I want to do now is extrude a rounded shape instead of a square shape. To do that, I can select the vertices, holding down Shift. So I have all 4 selected and nothing else selected. I can then click on Bevel. Bevel, remember, on an edge will curve that edge, but bevel on a vertex duplicates the vertex. So since each vertex became 2 vertices, the divisions of 1, 4 became 8. Hitting W to commit that change, I'll select these vertices, hitting Q so that the gizmo is not in my way, select all of those, and hit bevel again. 8 has now become 16. This circle is a bit too big, so I'll select it, hit R for scale, and go quite a bit smaller. And we have a lot of vertices around it that we don't need. We'd like all of those vertices to be welded to these corners. To do that, we go to vertex mode, and we have an option called target weld. We have to be careful with target welds to only have the vertices selected that we want to weld, because any other vertices that are selected, like something behind the model or someplace else in the model, will also get welded and we'll get some bad geometry. So we want to make sure this is all that's selected. We hit target welds, and then we click and drag from any one of those vertices to the destination. And we can see it creates these dotted lines showing us clearly where it's going to go. And then we release. And now all of those vertices are where we want them. Hitting Q, I'll select these vertices, and then hitting target welds, weld them all to that corner. Hitting Q for selection, and then target weld to weld. And then hitting Q for selection, target weld to weld. And finally, hitting Q to make sure that we're in selection mode. I select this face, I hit extrude, and I pull out the bar part of the knob, hit W and extrude again, and then hit R to scale it larger, extrude to pull out a little bit, hit W, extrude, hit R, and scale. And we have a knob. To make that knob look a little bit less chunky, we can select all of the edges on this geometry and go to a menu called Mesh Display, which offers the option of harden and soften edge. First, we'll soften all these edges, then double-click the place where the round part and the shaft part of the knob meet, and go to Mesh Display, Harden Edge. Right-click for Object, and we now have a knob. For the last part of this demonstration, I'm going to hide this object and quickly make a dinosaur. Going here to my channel box, we have display options, and I can create a folder containing everything that is selected by clicking this button at the end. I click, and this new folder contains all the cabinet items, and I can hit V to hide them or make them visible. I can also select each one of these objects and give them a more useful name, like cabinet. Right now, there's some history of the work that I did on this object, and it's a good idea to delete that history. Edit, delete by type, history. And in that way, we don't use too much memory on the computer. That could cause the program to crash if that history got too long, and too long is usually hours worth of work. This also has history that I should delete, as does this. So with all of these objects hidden, I'm now going to draw out a basic dinosaur shape, which is a good example of how we create organic objects. In the modeling menus, going to Mesh Tools, we have the Create Polygon tool, and I'm going to create a quick brontosaurus. Here is one leg. I'm using as few clicks as I can. Here is going to be the face, no teeth, and here is the back, and here is some tail. I go just before the end, and then I hit return to complete it. And you may be saying, this looks like a pretty awkwardly shaped dinosaur, but you can fix anything that you've done by going to the modeling toolkit and hitting vertex or right-clicking for vertex mode. Selecting a vertex here in this front view, we can drag down and move up any vertices we want. I'm selecting around many vertices to make these changes. Because I'm in the front view, this is a good time to click on this blue square. I'm in an orthographic view. It is safe to do it, because I'm still only moving in two axes on one plane here in the orthographic front view. And that perhaps looks a little bit more like a creature that has been thought through. I'd like to have a bit more curve here on the bottom, so I can go to the multi-cut tool, click on this vertex, and click on this edge. Hit W, and I can select this vertex and move it. Ultimately, I should have quads, so hitting connect on these points eventually. But for now, it'll be easier if I have as few faces as possible, because I need to select all of them, space bar my way to show all views, go to the perspective view, and hit extrude, which allows me to pull out a 3D version of this geometry. Now, much work could be done to create a much more rounded form, and then perhaps you can cut off the legs and extrude the legs from the sides so there are 4 legs instead of 2. But if you're just trying to create quick mocked up geometry for trees or characters just to throw into a scene to act as those objects for the purposes of visualization, this is a great quick technique. Using the Mesh tool, Create Polygon to draw the form in the front view, and then in perspective view, extrude it out. It is also helpful to know how to delete faces and then fill in those holes. Let's start with a box, and I'm going to hit spacebar to make this the only view. Going to Inputs, I'll select all 3 of these width, height, and depth, and hit 3 to make this size 3, and then do the subdivisions to create those lines. We saw earlier that if we select an edge, we can hit Delete to set it to a state of flux so that this entire area can be selected with a single click. But if we hit Delete with a face selected, it actually cuts a hole in the object and we can see how it is hollow. I'm going to select a hole on this side also. And one purpose of this, if I select these edges on both sides, could be to bridge in order to make a tunnel. We don't even have to delete those faces to make the bridge. If the faces are simply selected, we hit bridge, it makes that tunnel. But what if there was a hole that we actually didn't want? We want these faces back. Well, there are a few ways to fill this in. One is to select all the edges of this boundary, and then use a function up here in the Mesh menu called Fill Hole. Now the shape that's been added is more than 4 sides, so it would be good to click these 2 vertices and hit Connect, W to finish the function, click one, shift click another, and hit Connect. And now that geometry is back as if it was never away. Alternatively, bridge can be used on edges, hitting W and then choosing this sides, hitting W and selecting these 2. That was bridge to get the same results. And finally, we could actually make use of that ability to make an extrude just by holding down Shift. On edges, this is called strip modeling. I'd shift-click drag out the edge. This edge is now a loose edge, but then I can use the vertex mode for target weld to connect that up. 3D objects are meant to be viewed in motion. If you just let this scene stay put and try to model, things will get confusing pretty quickly. Our eyes are much more comfortable seeing this moving. Here I can select both of these edges at the same time, hold down Shift, click, drag out this form, and then I can use target weld on an edge to snap it to this edge. But I'm left with a vertex, hitting W for select, a vertex that needs to be target welded. And that is how to delete and fill holes. It can also be useful if you've got lots of objects in your scene and you just want to look at one at a time, to select that one and hit Command 1, which isolates the view. Command 1 again brings everything back. So that the cone is isolated or this other box is isolated with Command 1. And it only works with the view that you're currently in. So if I have the mouse hovering over the side view and I select this object and hit Command 1, it's only in the side view that the other objects disappear. It's whatever view I'm hovering over. File, Save Scene As. Don't forget to save your work. Every few minutes, Command S or Control S, and every hour, File, Save As a new file. Same name, but with 0102. So after 5 hours of work, you've got 5 files. This guards against crashes and corruption. And every day, upload your file to an online repository to guard against the unlikely possibility of your computer catching on fire. So that was a quick introduction to modeling in Maya. Thank you for listening.